Wait, isn't that Michael's ex-wife? The one who left with nothing? How is she stepping out of a Lamborghini? The whispers spread through Michael Bosch's Halloween party like wildfire, sharp and incredulous. Champagne glasses paused mid-air. Designer costumes turned toward the entrance. Elaborate decorations, fake cobwebs draped over crystal chandeliers, jack-o'-lanterns glowing on marble pedestals, actors in monster makeup roaming through crowds, all faded into irrelevance. Because something far more dramatic than any staged horror was unfolding in real time. The orange Lamborghini Aventador sat at the entrance like a beacon, its paint gleaming under the streetlights like a phoenix rising from flames. The valet stood frozen, keys in hand, clearly unsure of protocol for a vehicle that cost more than his annual salary. Inside the mansion, Chicago's elite mingled in expensive costumes. Vampires in Versace. Witches in Dior. Zombies in custom tailoring. These were Michael's people now, successful, polished, wealthy. The kind of crowd that measured worth in zeros and status in square footage. But they had all stopped. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Every phone lowered. Every eye fixed on the entrance. On her. You know, sometimes life has a funny way of coming full circle. Sometimes the person who breaks you becomes the very reason you discover just how powerful you really are. Sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you is actually the setup for the greatest comeback of your life. This is the story of Talia Jones, now Talia Foster, and how she went from being the woman who gave everything to a man who gave her nothing, to becoming the woman who walked into his Halloween party with triplets on her hip, a billionaire on her arm, and a revenge sweeter than any candy. Before we dive in, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like on this video, and let me know in the comments what country you're watching from. I love hearing from you all. Thank you. The car door opened with a soft, expensive click of German engineering. Richard Foster stepped out first. 6 feet of quiet power in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that whispered wealth in a way that Michael's vampire costume could only shout. No cape. No fangs. No costume. Just a man who didn't need to pretend to be powerful because everyone in that room already knew exactly who he was. The founder of Foster Technologies. Forbes list of most influential under 40. Net worth, $4.2 billion with AB. And he was here. At Michael Bosch's party. Holding out his hand with the kind of old-fashioned chivalry that made every woman in the vicinity sigh. That's when she emerged. Talia Foster, formerly Talia Jones, formerly Talia Bosch, stepped out of the Lamborghini in a red dress that cost more than she used to make in 3 months. The costume was simple but devastating, a devil. Red fabric that hugged every curve she'd earned back after 3 pregnancies. Red gloves that reached her elbows. And a headband with red horns that somehow managed to look elegant instead of campy. Diamonds at her throat. Confidence in her posture. Beauty and power radiating from every pore. But she wasn't alone. Richard reached back into the car, and that's when the crowd's collective breath hitched. 3 children. He lifted them out one by one, each in their own elaborate costume. The first, a tiny boy in a vampire costume with a cape that dragged behind him. The second, another boy in a miniature tuxedo that matched Richard's exactly. The third, a little girl in a glittering red princess dress that sparkled under the party lights. Triplets. The crowd's gasp was audible. Conversations didn't just pause, they stopped entirely. Someone dropped a champagne glass. The sound of crystal shattering on marble echoed through the suddenly silent entryway. Because everyone at this party knew the story. Michael had told it. Repeatedly. His first wife who couldn't give him children. His barren ex-wife who had held him back. The woman too stressed and unhealthy to conceive. And here she stood, holding hands with 3 beautiful, healthy, identical toddlers who looked to be about 2 years old. The math was devastating. She'd gotten pregnant right after the divorce. Maybe even before it was finalized. With the man who'd claimed she was the problem. At the doorway, Dressed in an elaborate vampire costume complete with cape and theatrical fangs, Michael Bosch stood frozen. His face, already pale with makeup, went completely white. His confident smile, the one he'd been wearing all evening while greeting guests and accepting congratulations on his successful life, collapsed into slack-jawed shock. His brain was clearly struggling. You could see it in his eyes, the desperate attempt to reconcile the image before him with the narrative he'd constructed. The story he'd told himself. The version of events where he was the successful one who'd escaped a failing marriage. His poor, broken ex-wife. His victim. His proof of superiority. His mistake. Standing before him with triplets, a billionaire, and a Lamborghini. Beside him, Jane Stevenson, dressed as a witch in an elaborate purple gown, had her hand frozen over her mouth. Her eyes darted between Talia, Richard, the children, and the car. Then to Michael. Then back to Talia. The shock on her face was almost as satisfying as the shock on Michael's. Almost. Is that really her? I thought Michael said she was poor. How does she know Richard Foster? Wait, are those triplets? Didn't Michael say she couldn't have kids? That's a Lamborghini Aventador. Those start at $500,000. Those aren't costume jewelry diamonds. Those are real. Who is she? The whispers rippled through the crowd like waves, each person turning to their neighbor, each question building on the last. Phone cameras came out. This was the kind of moment that would be all over social media by morning. Michael Bosch's Halloween party was about to become legendary. Just not for the reasons he'd planned. Talia stood there for a moment, letting the crowd take her in. Letting Michael process. Letting Jane realize. Letting every single person who had heard Michael's version of their story see the truth. She wasn't broken. She wasn't pathetic. She wasn't the mistake he'd escaped. She was the woman who'd transformed pain into power. Betrayal into business. Heartbreak into a happiness so complete it radiated from her like light. And she had come to his party not to beg for scraps or prove herself worthy. She had come to close a chapter. To look him in the eyes from a position of absolute strength and show everyone, exactly what he'd thrown away. The triplets were getting restless. Rosa tugged on her hand. Nate pointed at the jack-o'-lanterns. Pete was trying to squirm out of Richard's arms to explore. Ready? Richard asked softly, his voice meant only for her. Talia looked at her ex-husband. At his shock. At his horror. At the moment he realized that his entire narrative was about to crumble. And she smiled. Not with malice. Not with cruelty. But with something far more devastating. Complete and total indifference. Ready, she said. They walked toward the entrance as a family, elegant, confident, happy. The kind of family that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread, rather than at a party where they weren't truly welcome. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Every eye followed them. Every whisper grew louder. And Michael Bosch, standing in the doorway of his own party, wearing a costume that was supposed to make him look powerful and intimidating, looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. Or worse. A ghost who was doing far better than he was. But this story doesn't start with a Lamborghini and designer costumes. It doesn't start with triplets and billionaires and Halloween parties that end in shock and whispers. It starts 3 years earlier. With a broken woman, a cruel man, and $45,000 that would change everything. It starts with Talia Jones at 24 years old, standing at an altar in a simple dress, believing in fairy tales and forever. Believing that love could conquer anything. Believing that marriage meant partnership. She was wrong about all of it. And it would take losing everything, her money, her marriage, her sense of self, before she could discover what she was really worth. So let me take you back. Back to the beginning. Back to the moment Talia Jones married Michael Bosch and set into motion a chain of events that would lead to this Halloween night. Because you can't understand the triumph without understanding the tragedy. You can't appreciate the phoenix without knowing about the fire. And you definitely can't understand why Michael Bosch's face drained of all color when his ex-wife walked through that door. Without knowing what he did to her 3 years ago. 3 years earlier, Talia Jones stood at a simple altar in a community center, wearing a white dress she'd found on sale for $200, and believed with her whole heart that she was marrying her best friend. She was 24 years old. Young, yes, but not foolish. Or so she thought. Michael Bosch stood across from her in a rented tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his smile warm and genuine. He had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, the only person in the world. When he looked at Talia, she felt seen, valued, chosen. "I promise to build a life with you," he said during his vows, squeezing her hands. "To be your partner in everything. To never let you face anything alone." The wedding was small. Talia's sister Emma was there, along with a handful of friends and Michael's business contacts. It wasn't the fairy tale wedding Talia had dreamed about as a girl, but it was theirs. And that felt like enough. It felt like everything. What she didn't notice, or chose not to notice, was how many times Michael checked his phone during the reception. How Jane Stevenson, his ex-girlfriend, somehow ended up invited despite Talia never adding her to the guest list. How Jane stayed late, laughing at Michael's jokes, touching his arm in that familiar way that made Talia's stomach twist. "She's just my ex-babe," Michael said when Talia mentioned it later that night. "Ancient history. You're my future. You're my wife." And Talia wanted so badly to believe him that she pushed the doubt aside and focused on what mattered, building their life together. She worked 2 jobs to make that happen. Morning shifts waitressing at Rosie's Diner on Michigan Avenue, where she smiled through rude customers and aching feet for tips that barely covered gas. Night shifts doing data entry from home, her eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets until 2 a.m. Michael was working too, he said. Building his career. Making connections. Laying the foundation for their future. But futures, Talia learned, required sacrifice. And in their marriage, only one of them was making it. 6 months into the marriage, Michael came home with fire in his eyes. "I have an opportunity," he said, pacing their tiny apartment living room. A real one. A tech startup, inventory management software for small businesses. "The market is wide open, Talia. We could be looking at millions within a few years." Talia looked up from her laptop, exhausted from another double shift. "That's amazing, babe. What do you need?" "Investors." Michael sat beside her, taking her hands. "I need $50,000 to get the prototype built and start pitching to VCs. I've already got interest from some big players, but I need to show them something tangible first." Talia's heart sank. "We don't have that kind of money." "No." Michael's eyes found hers, intense and hopeful. "You do." The silence stretched between them. Talia had $45,000 in savings. Money she'd been accumulating since she was 16 years old. Babysitting money. Birthday money. Every spare dollar from every part-time job through high school and college. Money she'd protected fiercely through years of barely scraping by. It was supposed to be for a bakery someday. Her dream. A little shop where she could create the pastries and cakes that made people smile. Where she could build something that was entirely hers. Talia. Michael's voice was soft now, persuasive. "This isn't just my dream. It's ours. This is an investment in us. In our future. Think about it. If this works, we could have everything. A house. Financial security. We could start a family. Isn't that what you want?" She did want that. Desperately. "What about my bakery?" she asked quietly. Michael pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Baby, once this takes off, you can have 10 bakeries. I promise you. I'm not asking you to give up your dream. I'm asking you to help me build something that makes all our dreams possible." It sounded so reasonable. So romantic, even. Partners investing in each other. Building something together. 2 weeks later, Talia transferred $45,000 into Michael's business account. He took her to dinner that night. Nothing fancy, just the Italian place they'd gone to on their first date. He held her hand across the table and looked at her with such tenderness that she felt her doubts melt away. "You won't regret this," he promised. "I'm going to make you so proud." And for a few months, it seemed like he would. Michael's company, Bosch Solutions, launched 6 months later. The software was good, really good. Small businesses started subscribing. Money started flowing in. Michael's phone rang constantly with investor calls and partnership opportunities. Talia watched her husband transform before her eyes. The rented tuxedos became custom Tom Ford suits. The used Honda became a Tesla Model S. The cheap haircuts became $200 salon appointments. Michael started dining at steakhouses where a single meal cost more than Talia made in a week. He posted about it all on social media. Photos of himself at networking events, shaking hands with Chicago's business elite. Photos of the Tesla. Photos of expensive watches and craft cocktails. Photos without Talia. She was still waitressing at Rosie's. Still doing data entry until her vision blurred. Still buying generic groceries and calculating whether she could afford to run the heat. "When do I get to be part of this?" she asked one night when Michael came home after midnight, smelling like expensive cologne and wine. "Part of what?" He loosened his tie, barely looking at her. "Your success. Our success. The company I helped fund." Michael's expression hardened. "You gave me a gift, Talia. You don't get to hold that over my head every time you're feeling insecure." "I'm not," she stopped, swallowing the hurt. "I just thought maybe we could talk about starting a family now. You said once the business took off. We can't afford it." The words hit like a slap. "You just bought a $90,000 car," Talia said quietly. "For business. Image matters in my industry. You wouldn't understand." He walked past her toward the bedroom. "I'm exhausted. Can we not do this tonight?" But they did it every night after that. Different versions of the same conversation. Talia asking for partnership, presents, something. Michael making her feel small for wanting it. Jane's name started appearing more frequently. Late-night calls that Michael took in the other room. Business meetings that ran until 2 a.m. Texts that made Michael smile in ways he hadn't smiled at Talia in months. "You're being paranoid," Michael said when she finally confronted him. "Jane is my business partner. That's all. What's wrong with you lately? You're so negative. So clingy. Honestly, Talia, it's exhausting. What's wrong with you?" The question burrowed into her brain, repeating like a mantra. "What's wrong with you? Why aren't you enough? Why can't you just be happy for him?" Talia looked in the mirror one morning and barely recognized herself. She'd lost 15 pounds she couldn't afford to lose. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hair hung limp and lifeless. She looked like a ghost. She felt like one too. Invisible in her own home. In her own marriage. In the life she'd sacrificed everything to build. Michael came home that night with Jane. They were laughing about something, their heads close together, comfortable in a way that made Talia's chest ache. "Oh," Michael said when he saw her. "You're still up." Like she was an inconvenience. A stranger in her own living room. "We're going over investor presentations," Jane added, not quite meeting Talia's eyes. "It's going to be a late night." They disappeared into Michael's home office. The door closed. The lock clicked. And Talia stood in the kitchen of the apartment she couldn't afford, in the marriage she'd given everything for, and felt the foundation of her world begin to crack. She just didn't know yet that it was about to shatter completely. Thursday afternoon, Talia left work early. She'd been feeling sick all morning, nauseous, dizzy, her head pounding with a migraine that made the diner's fluorescent lights feel like knives. Her manager, Rosa, took one look at her pale face and sent her home. "You look like death, honey," Rosa said, not unkindly. "Go. Rest. We'll manage." Talia drove home in a fog, grateful that for once she could crawl into bed before the sun set. Michael would be at the office until late, as usual. She'd have the apartment to herself. Maybe she could sleep off whatever this was. She unlocked the door as quietly as possible, not wanting to disturb the silence. Kicked off her shoes. Dropped her purse on the entry table. And heard voices coming from the bedroom. Talia froze. Michael's voice. Low and intimate. And another voice. Female. Familiar. Jane. Her feet carried her down the hallway before her brain could catch up. She moved like a ghost, silent and unreal, until she stood outside the bedroom door. It was cracked open just slightly. Enough to hear everything. Enough to hear her world end. "When are you going to tell her?" Jane's voice. Soft but insistent. "Soon." Michael sounded tired. "I just need to secure everything first. The investors are finalizing the series of funding next month. Once that closes and my shares vest, I'll tell her. She's going to figure it out eventually." A pause. "I'm starting to show." Talia's hand flew to her mouth, trapping the sound that wanted to escape. Jane was pregnant. "She won't figure it out," Michael said with a confidence that made Talia's blood run cold. "She's too stressed, too broken, too wrapped up in her own misery to notice anything. Honestly, Jane, she's become pathetic. I can barely stand to be in the same room with her." Jane laughed. Actually laughed. "I almost feel bad. She really believed you, didn't she? She believed everything. That we were partners. That her little $45,000 investment made her part of the company." Michael's voice dripped with contempt. "She funded the whole thing, and her name's not on a single document. My lawyer made sure of that." "How much is the company worth now?" "About $2 million. Could be $10 million after the next funding round." Talia felt the walls tilt. $2 million. The company she'd funded with her entire life savings was worth $2 million, and she owned none of it. God, Michael. Jane's voice carried a note of admiration. "You really thought of everything." "I had to. Look, I married her when I was broke and desperate. I needed capital, and she had it. I needed someone stable while I built the business. She served her purpose. But now..." He sighed. "Now she's just dead weight. Depressed. Needy. Constantly asking about starting a family, like I'd want to have kids with her." "But you want them with me." Jane's voice went soft, pleased. "Of course I do. You get it. You're ambitious. You're sophisticated. You're everything she's not." Michael's voice moved closer to the door. "The divorce will be clean. She'll get nothing because legally, she's entitled to nothing. That money was a gift. The apartment's in my name. She came into this marriage with nothing, and she'll leave with nothing." "When?" "After the funding closes. Maybe another month. Then I'll tell her it's over, we'll do the paperwork, and she'll be gone. We can finally be a real family." Talia didn't remember backing away from the door. Didn't remember stumbling to the bathroom. Didn't remember locking herself inside and sliding down the wall until she was sitting on the cold tile floor. She remembered crying, though. Silent, gasping sobs that tore through her chest like broken glass. She bit down on her fist to keep quiet, tasting blood, her whole body shaking with the force of trying to stay silent while her heart shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together. An hour passed. Maybe two. She heard the bedroom door open. Footsteps. The front door closing. Voices in the hallway, fading. When she finally emerged, The apartment was empty. Talia walked to Michael's home office on legs that didn't feel like her own. Opened his laptop, password still saved from when they'd shared everything. Pulled up the company documents. Bosch Solutions, LLC. Valuation, $2.1 million. Owner, Michael James Bosch. 100% equity. Her name appeared nowhere. Not as a founder. Not as an investor. Not even as a spouse with marital assets. Nowhere. She'd given him everything, and he'd made sure she legally had nothing. 1 week later, Talia was wiping down tables at the diner when her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. The first direct communication she'd had with him since that afternoon. We need to talk. I'm filing for divorce. No explanation. No apology. No humanity. Just 8 words that confirmed what she already knew. She'd meant nothing to him. Had never meant anything except as a means to an end. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later. Talia sat in Emma's apartment. She'd moved out the day after the text, unable to spend another night in that place, and read through the legal documents with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Division of assets, none. Talia Jones brought no significant assets into the marriage and is entitled to no portion of Bosch Solutions, LLC. Spousal support, denied. Marriage duration insufficient to warrant alimony. The $45,000 she'd given him? Her lawyer, a free consultation from legal aid, shook his head sadly. He's claiming it was a gift. And technically, without documentation stating otherwise, he's right. You have no legal recourse. But I funded his entire company, Talia whispered. I believe you. But belief doesn't hold up in court. You'd need contracts, equity agreements, written proof of investment terms. Do you have any of that? She didn't. She'd trusted her husband. That had been her only documentation. I'm sorry, the lawyer said. He planned this well. Very well. Talia signed the papers in Emma's kitchen on a Tuesday morning. Her sister sat beside her, crying angry tears while Talia felt nothing at all. She was beyond tears now. Beyond anger. Beyond everything except a vast empty numbness that felt like drowning in slow motion. She packed her life into her Honda Civic that afternoon. Clothes. Books. A few kitchen items Michael didn't want. The wedding photos she'd later burn. Everything that remained of Talia Jones fit in a car that barely ran. She drove away from the apartment, from the marriage, from the man she'd loved, from the future she'd sacrificed everything to build, and felt the last piece of herself break apart. That night, scrolling through social media with masochistic compulsion, she saw Michael's post. A photo of him and Jane at a fancy restaurant. Her hand on her barely visible baby bump. His arm around her shoulders. Both of them smiling like they'd won the lottery. The caption, New beginnings with my beautiful partner. Excited for the next chapter. #blessed, #family first, #new life. The comments poured in. Congratulations. So happy for you. You deserve this. Talia turned off her phone and stared at Emma's ceiling until morning came. She had nothing left. No money. No home. No husband. No future. No sense of who she was or what she was worth. Michael Bosch had taken everything from her, including the belief that she deserved anything at all. And the worst part, the part that would haunt her for months to come, was that she'd handed it all to him willingly. She'd funded her own destruction. Emma's spare room was small, barely large enough for a twin bed, a dresser, and the cardboard boxes containing everything Talia owned. It had a single window that looked out onto the alley behind the building, where she could hear garbage trucks at dawn and neighbors arguing at midnight. It became Talia's entire world. Depression wrapped around her like a burial shroud, heavy and suffocating. It pressed against her chest when she woke up. If she woke up. Most days she didn't. She'd lie in that twin bed staring at the water stain on the ceiling, tracing its edges with her eyes, and feel absolutely nothing except the weight. The weight of failure. Of worthlessness. Of knowing she'd been so fundamentally stupid that she'd funded her own destruction. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Talia barely left the bed except to use the bathroom. Emma brought food that sat untouched on the nightstand. Crackers. Soup. Smoothies. Things that were easy, that required no effort, that a person who'd given up might still manage to consume. Talia couldn't even do that. "You have to eat something," Emma said on day 16, sitting on the edge of the bed with a bowl of chicken noodle soup. Her voice was gentle but firm, the tone she'd used when they were kids and Talia had scraped her knee or lost a friend. "Just a few bites. Please. I'm not hungry." "You haven't been hungry in 2 weeks. You're going to get sick." "I'm already sick." Talia turned her face to the wall. "I'm broken, Emma. He was right about me. I'm pathetic and broken and—" "Stop." Emma's hand found Talia's shoulder. "He was a monster. Nothing he said about you was true." But it felt true. God, it felt so true. Emma started interventions. Small ones at first. Bringing Talia to the bathroom and sitting outside while she showered. Setting timers for meals. Opening the curtains every morning even though Talia immediately closed them again. "I called the diner," Emma said one afternoon. "Told Rosa you won't be coming back." Talia should have felt something about that. Panic, maybe, about losing income. Relief about not having to face people. Something. Instead, she felt the same vast numbness that had become her constant companion. "I can't afford." "You're still doing data entry, right? That's enough for now. You need to focus on getting better." Better felt impossible. Better felt like a foreign country she'd never visit again. Emma found a therapist who took Medicaid. Dr. Sarah Chun, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach that somehow made Talia feel less like she was drowning and more like she was just underwater. "Depression is a liar," Dr. Chun said during their second session. "It tells you that this feeling is permanent. That you're broken beyond repair. That you'll never recover." But Talia? That's the depression talking. Not the truth. The panic attacks started 3 weeks in. Talia would be lying in bed, and suddenly her heart would race like she was being chased. Her chest would tighten. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't do anything except ride out the wave of terror that convinced her she was dying. The nightmares were worse. Michael's face. His voice saying pathetic over and over. Jane laughing. The bedroom door. The divorce papers. Watching herself hand over that $45,000 check in an endless loop, knowing what would happen but unable to stop it. She'd wake up crying, gasping, Emma already at the door with water and tissues and that fierce older sister protectiveness that was the only thing keeping Talia tethered to this world. "You're going to get through this," Emma would say, sitting on the floor beside the bed until Talia's breathing slowed. "I promise you. You're going to survive this." Survival felt like the most Talia could hope for. Recovery felt like a fantasy. Actually thriving? Being happy? Trusting anyone ever again? Impossible. And yet, 3 months after the divorce was finalized, something shifted. Not a big shift. Not hope or healing or anything remotely resembling okay. Just different. The nausea had been getting worse. Talia assumed it was the depression. Or maybe her body finally rebelling against weeks of barely eating. Or stress. Or the universe's way of reminding her that everything about her existence was wrong. Dr. Chun suggested a physical checkup. Sometimes depression has physical causes. Let's rule out anything medical. The appointment was on a Thursday. A detail Talia would remember forever because Thursdays had become cursed in her mind. The day she'd come home early. The day her life had ended. Dr. Patel was young, efficient, kind. She listened to Talia's symptoms, nausea, fatigue, dizziness, sensitivity to smells, and nodded thoughtfully. When was your last period? Talia blinked. I don't know. I haven't been tracking. Everything's been chaotic. I understand. Dr. Patel made a note. Let's run some tests. Just to be thorough. 20 minutes later, Talia was staring at a pregnancy test with 2 pink lines. That's not possible, she whispered. Dr. Patel's expression was gentle. The test is quite accurate. But let's do an ultrasound to confirm and see how far along you are. The ultrasound machine was wheeled in. Talia lay on the examination table, her mind spinning, her heart racing. Pregnant. She was pregnant. With Michael's baby. The baby he didn't want. The baby he'd said they couldn't afford. The baby he'd refused to even discuss while he was planning a family with Jane. There we are, Dr. Patel said, moving the wand across Talia's abdomen. The screen showed grainy black and white images that meant nothing to Talia's untrained eye. You're about 12 weeks along. Right at the end of the first trimester. 12 weeks. That meant she'd gotten pregnant right before the divorce. Or just after. In those final, terrible weeks when she'd still been trying to save her marriage, while Michael had been planning its end. The irony was devastating. All those times Michael had shut down conversations about starting a family. All his excuses about timing and money and not being ready. And here she was, pregnant with his child, after he'd left her for someone else who was also pregnant. Ms. Jones. Dr. Patel's voice pulled her back. Are you all right? I know this is a lot to process. I can't. I don't know if I can do this. Talia's voice broke. I'm barely surviving as it is. How am I supposed to raise a baby? Dr. Patel was quiet for a moment, still studying the screen. Talia, there's something else. Something you need to know. The way she said it made Talia's blood run cold. Something else. Something wrong. Of course there was something wrong. Everything in her life was wrong. What? Talia forced herself to look at the screen. What's wrong with the baby? Nothing's wrong. Dr. Patel's face broke into a smile. But you're not having a baby. You're having 3. The world stopped. What? Triplets. Dr. Patel pointed at the screen, where Talia could now see 3 distinct, fluttering heartbeats. 3 healthy babies. Right here, here, and here. Fraternal triplets, from the look of it. 3 babies. 3. Talia started laughing. Then crying. Then laughing again, until she couldn't tell which was which, and Dr. Patel was pressing tissues into her hands and asking if she needed water. 3 babies. Michael, the man who'd called her broken, who'd implied she was the reason they couldn't conceive, who'd made her feel like she was fundamentally defective, had gotten her pregnant with triplets. 3 perfect, healthy babies growing inside her body. 3 pieces of proof that he'd been wrong. That she wasn't the problem. That she'd never been the problem. I know this is overwhelming, Dr. Patel said gently. You have options. We can discuss. I'm keeping them. The words came out fierce, certain. All of them. I'm keeping my babies. Dr. Patel smiled. Then we'll need to start you on prenatal vitamins immediately, schedule regular checkups, and talk about nutrition for a multiple pregnancy. Talia barely heard the rest. She was staring at the screen, at those 3 fluttering heartbeats, and feeling something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope, exactly. Not yet. But something close. Something like purpose. She drove to Emma's apartment in a daze, walked inside, and found her sister making dinner. Emma. Talia's voice shook. I need to tell you something. Emma turned, took one look at Talia's face, and went pale. What happened? Are you okay? I'm pregnant. The words felt surreal. With triplets. 3 babies. I'm having 3 babies. Emma's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Then she started crying and pulled Talia into a fierce hug. "Oh my God," Emma whispered. "Oh my God, Talia. I know. It's insane. I'm barely functioning and now I'm going to have 3 babies and I don't know how I'm going to." "You're going to be an amazing mother." Emma pulled back, gripping Talia's shoulders. "Do you hear me? You're going to be amazing." "I'm so scared." "I know. But Talia." Emma's eyes were fierce, blazing with the same protectiveness that had kept Talia alive these past months. "These babies are a gift. They're proof that you're not broken. You were never broken." He was wrong about everything. And standing in Emma's kitchen, with 3 tiny heartbeats fluttering inside her and her sister's hands steady on her shoulders, Talia felt the first crack in the darkness that had consumed her. She was terrified, overwhelmed, still depressed, still broken in 100 ways. But she was also a mother. About to be a mother of 3. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start climbing out of the pit Michael had left her in. 5 months pregnant, Talia looked like she was carrying a basketball. Or 3 basketballs, more accurately. Her body had transformed almost overnight, her belly stretching to accommodate 3 growing babies who seemed determined to make their presence known. "You need to do prenatal yoga," Emma said one Saturday morning, holding up a flyer. "It's good for multiple pregnancies. Helps with flexibility, breathing, stress relief." "I don't want to go to a yoga class." Talia was folding baby clothes, second-hand onesies from a thrift store that Emma had insisted on buying. "I'll be the only person there without a partner." "So? You have me." "Emma, you work Saturdays." "Then you'll go alone. And you'll be fine." Emma's tone left no room for argument. "You're already doing this alone, Talia. You might as well get comfortable with it." The words stung, but they were true. That's how Talia found herself walking into Serenity Wellness Studio the following Saturday, feeling enormously pregnant and enormously self-conscious. The class was full of glowing couples, husbands with hands on wives' bellies, partners whispering encouragement, everyone looking like they'd stepped out of a prenatal magazine. And then there was Talia. Alone. Trying not to think about how she'd imagined this moment so differently. She grabbed a yoga mat and headed toward the back of the room, where she could hide behind the other pregnant women and their supportive partners. Someone was already there. A man, sitting cross-legged on a mat, looking as uncomfortable as Talia felt. He was tall, she could tell even with him sitting, with dark hair graying at the temples and the kind of face that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. He wore a plain gray t-shirt and athletic pants, and he looked completely out of place. The class started. Talia tried to focus on the instructor's soothing voice, on the breathing exercises and gentle stretches. But she kept noticing the man in the back. He moved through the poses mechanically, like someone going through motions without being present. She recognized that emptiness. She lived in it. After class, as Talia struggled to roll up her yoga mat, everything was harder at 5 months pregnant, the man approached. "Here, let me help." His voice was gentle, kind. He took one end of the mat and helped her roll it properly. "Thanks." Talia managed a small smile. "I'm still figuring out how to do basic things with this belly." "How far along are you?" 5 months. "Triplets." His eyebrows rose. "Triplets. Wow. That's amazing. That's one word for it." She studied his face. "You looked about as thrilled to be here as I was." He laughed, a real laugh that seemed to surprise him. "Was it that obvious?" "Pretty obvious, yeah. My doctor recommended it. For processing grief." He extended his hand. "I'm Richard." "Talia." She shook his hand, noting the firmness of his grip, the calluses that suggested he worked with his hands despite his expensive watch. Grief. Richard's expression shifted. I lost my wife 8 months ago. Car accident. She was pregnant. We were going to have a daughter. He looked away. My doctor thought yoga might help. Something about being around new life, learning to breathe again. I think she was grasping at straws, honestly. Talia's chest tightened. I'm so sorry. Thank you. And you. He gestured gently toward her belly. No partner. Divorced. 3 months ago. She surprised herself by continuing. He left me for someone else. Who's also pregnant. With his baby. It's a very special kind of hell. Richard winced. That is special. In the worst possible way. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, two people connected by loss and an uncomfortable yoga class. Do you want to get coffee? Richard asked suddenly. I mean decaf, obviously. He ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. It's been a long time since I talked to someone who gets it. The being alone part. Talia should have said no. She barely knew this man. She wasn't ready to trust anyone, especially not men who seemed kind, because Michael had seemed kind once too. But something in Richard's eyes, the genuine loneliness, the shared understanding of loss, made her nod. Coffee sounds good. They talked in the parking lot for an hour. Richard told her about Alexandra, how they'd met in college, married young, built a life together. How he'd been at work when he got the call about the accident. How he'd held her hand while the machines kept her alive long enough to say goodbye. Talia told him about Michael. About the $45,000. About finding out he'd been planning her destruction all along. About the devastating irony of being pregnant with triplets by the man who'd claimed she was broken. You're not broken, Richard said quietly. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You're carrying 3 babies and rebuilding your life after betrayal most people couldn't survive. That's not broken. That's extraordinary. It was the first time in months someone had called her anything other than pathetic. They traded phone numbers. Friends who understand, Richard said. No pressure. Just, if you need someone to talk to who gets what it's like to feel alone in a crowded room. Friends who understand, Talia agreed. The weekly coffee meetings started after that. Every Saturday after yoga class, they'd sit in the corner booth at the cafe down the street. Talia drinking decaf chai, Richard drinking black coffee, both of them talking about everything and nothing. Richard came to her ultrasound appointments when Emma couldn't make it. He sat in the waiting room, scrolling through his phone, then celebrated with her when the technician confirmed all 3 babies were healthy and growing perfectly. You're going to be an incredible mother, he said in the parking lot afterward. Those kids are lucky. Talia went with Richard when he visited Alexandra's grave. She stood back respectfully while he talked to the headstone, updating his late wife on his life, his grief, his slow journey back to something resembling functional. Thank you for coming, he said on the drive back. Most people don't know what to do with grief. They want you to move on, get over it, be okay. You just, let me be not okay. You let me be not okay too, Talia said softly. And that, more than anything, was what made their friendship work. No pressure. No expectations. Just 2 broken people learning to exist in a world that had shattered their foundations. 3 months into their friendship, Richard had become a fixture in Talia's life. He helped her assemble cribs at 2 a.m. when Emma was working overnight shifts. He accompanied her to baby supply stores, patiently comparing car seat safety ratings and offering to carry packages to her car. He drove a modest Toyota Camry. Wore jeans and t-shirts to their coffee meetings. Never mentioned money or status or anything that suggested he was anything other than a guy processing grief while helping a friend through pregnancy. Talia had no idea. Emma discovered the truth on a Tuesday night. Talia was 8 months pregnant, enormous and uncomfortable, lying on the couch while Emma scrolled through her phone. Talia. Emma's voice was strange. Your friend Richard. What's his last name? Foster. Why? Emma's phone nearly slipped from her hands. Richard Foster. Richard Foster. Oh my God. What? Emma turned her phone around, showing Talia a Forbes article. The headline read, Tech Titan Richard Foster, How Foster Technologies Revolutionized Cloud Computing. The photo showed Richard, in an expensive suit, standing in front of a sleek office building, looking every inch the powerful CEO he apparently was. That's not possible, Talia whispered. $4 billion. Emma was scrolling frantically. $4 billion. He's number 47 on the Forbes billionaire list. Foster Technologies. They do cloud infrastructure for like half the Fortune 500 companies. Talia, your yoga buddy is one of the richest men in Chicago. Talia stared at the photos. Richard in boardrooms. Richard shaking hands with politicians. Richard accepting awards. Richard looking nothing like the man who'd helped her assemble cribs and bought her decaf chai. He never said anything, Talia said softly. He drives a Camry. He wears regular clothes. He wanted to be treated like a human instead of a bank account, Emma finished. Smart man. Talia confronted him the next day at their usual coffee shop. You're a billionaire. No preamble. No small talk. Richard winced. Emma Googled me. $4 billion, Richard. You could have mentioned it. When? He met her eyes steadily. When would have been the right time? Hi, I'm Richard. I'm grieving my dead wife and I'm obscenely wealthy. That's a great icebreaker. Talia sat down across from him. Why didn't you tell me? Because. Richard sighed. Because you saw me. Richard. Not Richard Foster, CEO. Not the money or the company or the image. You saw a guy who was sad and alone and struggling. And that was refreshing. Do you know how rare that is? The money doesn't change who you are, Talia said quietly. Doesn't it? Most people treat me differently once they know. They want things. Investments, donations, favors. Or they get weird, like I'm suddenly untouchable. But you. He smiled. You called me out when I was being stupid. You made me laugh. You treated me like a friend. You are a friend. Then can we keep it that way? Richard asked. I'm still just Richard. The guy who's terrible at yoga and drinks too much coffee. The money's just there. Talia nodded slowly. Okay. But Richard. Yeah. Next time you help me assemble baby furniture, I'm going to ask if you can just hire someone. He laughed. Deal. A week later, Richard showed up at Emma's apartment with his lawyer. I want to set up trust funds, he said. For the triplets. Education, healthcare, whatever they need. Richard, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. His expression was gentle but firm. Let me honor Alexandra's memory by helping new life. Please. So Talia let him. And their friendship deepened, not into romance, but into something stronger. Partnership. Trust. The kind of bond built on shared pain and genuine respect. Richard never pushed. Never pressured. Just showed up, consistently and selflessly, proving that not all men were Michael. Some men, Talia learned, were exactly who they appeared to be. Kind. At 34 weeks pregnant, Talia's water broke while she was folding laundry. One moment she was sorting tiny onesies into 3 separate piles. Organization would be crucial with triplets, Emma had insisted. And the next, she was standing in a puddle, feeling the first contraction grip her belly like a vice. Emma. Her voice came out higher than intended. Emma. Her sister appeared in the doorway, took one look, and went into crisis mode. Okay. Hospital. Now. Where's your bag? By the door. Call Richard. The babies are coming 5 weeks early, and you want me to call Richard? Please. Talia gripped the back of a chair as another contraction hit. He'll want to be there. Richard was at a business dinner downtown when Emma's call came through. He arrived at the hospital still wearing his tuxedo, bow tie loosened, looking like he'd sprinted from a gala. Which, apparently, he had. I'm here. He found Talia in the admission room, already in a hospital gown, breathing through contractions. I'm right here. You didn't have to, Talia gasped as another wave hit. You had that investor thing. Screw the investors. Richard took her hand, squeezing gently. Where else would I be? The labor lasted 12 hours. 12 hours of pain and pressure and Talia gripping Richard's hand so hard she was certain she'd broken bones. 12 hours of doctors checking dilation and nurses monitoring 3 heartbeats and Emma pacing the hallway because she couldn't handle seeing her sister in pain. 12 hours of Richard never leaving. Never complaining. Just being there, steady and constant, like he'd been for the past 6 months. You're doing amazing, he whispered during the worst of it, when Talia was crying and exhausted and convinced she couldn't do this. So strong. Almost there. Nate arrived first at 3:47 a.m., screaming his displeasure at being evicted from his warm home. 4 pounds, 6 ounces of furious, red-faced baby boy. That's one, the doctor announced. 2 more to go, Mama. Pete came 8 minutes later, quieter than his brother, but healthy and perfect. 4 pounds, 2 ounces. Rosa was last, arriving at 4:03 a.m. 3 pounds, 14 ounces, the smallest, but fighting strong. The doctor held her up, and Talia saw her daughter's tiny fists waving, her mouth opening in a cry that was pure determination. Congratulations, Mama, the doctor said, placing Rosa on Talia's chest while nurses attended to the boys. You did it. 3 healthy babies. Talia couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. She looked at the tiny human on her chest, felt the weight of her, the realness of her, and started crying. 3 babies. 3 perfect, healthy babies. Proof that she wasn't broken. That Michael had been wrong about everything. Can I? Richard's voice was thick with emotion. A nurse handed him Nate, carefully supporting the baby's head. Richard held him like he was made of glass, tears streaming down his face. He's perfect, Richard whispered. Talia, he's absolutely perfect. They brought Pete next, then Rosa. Richard held each one, his face transformed with wonder and love. These weren't his children biologically, but watching him cradle them, Talia saw something that made her chest ache. He loved them. Already and completely. The week-long hospital stay, standard for premature triplets, passed in a blur of learning to breastfeed 3 babies, changing impossibly tiny diapers, and trying to tell her identical sons apart. Solution: color-coded hospital bracelets that would eventually become color-coded everything. Richard was there every day. Every single day. He showed up at 7 a.m. and stayed until visiting hours ended at 9 p.m. He held babies while Talia slept. Walked colicky newborns at 3 a.m. when they wouldn't settle. Changed diapers without complaint. The nurses assumed he was the father. Neither Talia nor Richard corrected them. Your husband is wonderful, one nurse commented while showing Talia a better breastfeeding position for Rosa. Very hands-on. You're lucky. Talia looked at Richard across the room, holding both boys against his chest, talking to them softly about nothing and everything. Yeah, she said quietly. I am. Discharge day arrived with a mixture of excitement and terror. Talia was taking home 3 babies. 3 tiny humans who depended on her for everything. The weight of that responsibility felt crushing. Ready. Emma appeared with the triple stroller, a monstrosity of engineering that Richard had purchased and spent an hour figuring out. No. But I don't think I'll ever be ready, so we might as well go. Richard was waiting by the car, not his Camry, but an SUV with 3 car seats already installed. Professional installation, he'd assured her. The safest models available. They drove to Emma's building, Richard carrying the car seat with Nate, Emma with Pete, Talia with Rosa. The stairs to the 3rd floor felt impossible. Talia's body was still healing, exhausted, everything aching. "Close your eyes," Emma said when they reached the 3rd floor landing. "Emma, I can't. Please. Just trust me." Talia closed her eyes. Heard the door open. Smelled fresh paint. Okay. Open. The 3rd floor had been transformed. The cluttered storage space was gone. In its place, a beautiful nursery with 3 cribs, a comfortable rocking chair, changing table, and more supplies than Talia could process. The adjacent room, previously full of boxes, was now a bedroom with a king-sized bed, dresser, and ensuite bathroom. Everything was soft blues and greens and whites. Peaceful. Perfect. Richard. Talia turned to him, tears already falling. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." He set down Nate's car seat gently. "You and Emma were going to cram 4 people into that spare room. This made more sense. This must have cost." "Don't." His voice was gentle but firm. "Please. Let me do this." They put the babies down for their first nap at home. Emma excused herself to give them privacy. And suddenly, it was just Talia and Richard, standing in a nursery watching 3 tiny chests rise and fall. "Talia." Richard's voice was quiet. "I need to tell you something." Her stomach dropped. Here it came. The moment he said this was too much. That he was done playing house. That friendship was one thing, but triplets were another. "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. "I have been," Richard continued, "for months. Maybe since that first yoga class. Definitely by the time I held your hand during that ultrasound and saw all 3 of them on the screen." He ran a hand through his hair. "I know the timing is terrible. You just had 3 babies. I'm still grieving Alexandra. This is complicated and messy and I love you too." Richard stopped mid-sentence. "What?" "I love you too." Talia was crying now, exhausted tears that she couldn't control. "I've been in love with you for months. I just didn't think. I didn't think you could want this. 3 babies that aren't yours. An ex-husband who destroyed me. All this baggage." "Talia." Richard crossed to her, cupping her face gently. "You're not baggage. You're the strongest person I've ever met. And those babies." He glanced at the cribs. "I already love them. I've loved them since I felt Nate kick during that ultrasound. Since I held Rosa for the first time in the hospital. They may not be mine biologically, but..." She kissed him. Stood on her toes, carefully, everything still hurt, and kissed him like she'd been wanting to for months. It was gentle. Sweet. Perfect. "We should take this slow," Richard said when they finally pulled apart. "You're recovering. The babies need you. I don't want to rush." Slow is relative when you're already spending 18 hours a day together. He laughed. Fair point. Slow, it turned out, meant Richard being there for every middle of the night feeding. Hiring a night nurse so Talia could sleep more than 2 hours at a time. Setting up college funds and trust accounts that would ensure the triplets never had to worry about money. Slow meant holding hands while walking colicky babies. Stolen kisses during rare moments when all 3 were sleeping. Building a family one exhausting, beautiful day at a time. 3 months after the babies were born, Richard extended an invitation. "Move in with me," he said during one of their coffee dates, now held in Talia's living room because leaving the house with 3 infants was a logistical nightmare. Not as my girlfriend. As family. You and the babies. Emma too, if she wants. Richard. You're living in a converted attic with 3 4-month-olds. I have an 8-bedroom house that's empty except for me. He leaned forward. Full-time staff to help with the babies. Space for them to grow. A nursery that's not next to a staircase. This isn't charity, Talia. This is me wanting the people I love under the same roof. People will think. Let them think. Richard took her hand. Anyone who matters can see you're not with me for money. You didn't even know I had money for 3 months. Emma was more direct. Take the damn house, Talia. You're killing yourself doing this alone. So when the babies were 4 months old, Talia packed up their small life and moved into Richard Foster's mansion. And for the first time since Michael, she let herself believe in something resembling happiness. It was a Tuesday morning when Richard proposed. The triplets, 7 months old and suddenly mobile, were having tummy time on the living room floor. Nate was trying to army crawl toward a stuffed elephant. Pete was content to stay in one place, carefully examining his own feet. Rosa was the most determined, pushing herself up on chubby arms and rocking back and forth like she might achieve actual crawling through sheer willpower. Talia was lying on the floor beside Rosa, holding a toy just out of reach to encourage her daughter's efforts. Richard was sitting cross-legged with the boys, making ridiculous faces that had Nate giggling uncontrollably. "Marry me." Talia looked up. "What?" Richard met her eyes. "Marry me, Talia." "Richard." "I know it's fast." He shifted closer, careful not to disrupt Pete. "It's only been a year since we met. 8 months since we admitted we loved each other. Logically, this is insane." He took her hand. "But I know what love feels like. I had it with Alexandra. And I have it with you. Different, but just as real. Just as certain." Rosa made a frustrated sound, still reaching for the toy. Talia absently moved it closer. "I love you," Richard continued. "I love these babies like they're mine. Let me make it official. Let me make us a real family. Legally. Permanently. In every way that matters." Talia felt tears building. "Yes. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." She was crying now, laughing through the tears. Yes to all of it. They got married 3 weeks later at the courthouse. Nothing like Talia's first wedding. No elaborate ceremony or expensive dress or guest list full of people who barely knew them. Just Emma and Marcus as witnesses, and 3 babies in matching outfits that they'd inevitably spit up on before the day ended. Talia wore a simple white sundress from Target. Richard wore khakis and a button-down. Her bouquet was sunflowers from the farmer's market, bought that morning because she'd forgotten flowers were traditional. It was perfect. Perfect because it was real. Because when Richard slipped the ring on her finger and said, "I do," she believed him. Because when she promised to love him for the rest of her life, she meant it without reservation or doubt. "You may kiss your bride," the judge said, smiling at the chaos of 3 babies and 2 people clearly in love. Richard kissed her while Nate started crying and Rosa tried to eat her bouquet and Pete remained blissfully uninterested in the whole affair. "Mrs. Foster," Richard whispered against her lips. "Mrs. Foster," Talia repeated, tasting the name. Talia Foster. Not Talia Bosch. She'd reclaimed her maiden name after the divorce. Not Talia Jones anymore. Talia Foster. A whole new person. A whole new life. The adoption proceedings started immediately. 8 months of paperwork and home visits and legal processes designed to verify what everyone already knew. Richard Foster was these children's father in every way that mattered. He'd been there from before their birth. Changed their diapers. Walked them through colic. Celebrated their first smiles, first laughs, first attempts at solid food. Biology was just genetics. Family was choice. The day the judge declared Nate, Pete, and Rosa legally Richard Foster's children, Richard cried. "One of the happiest days of my life," he said that night, holding the adoption certificates like they were made of gold. Our family. Legal and unbreakable. Talia looked at her husband, at their children sleeping peacefully in their cribs, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. When the triplets turned 1 year old, 3 smash cakes, 3 sets of tiny hands covered in frosting, 3 different reactions ranging from Nate's enthusiastic destruction to Pete's cautious tasting to Rosa's artistic smearing, Talia started thinking about her dreams again. Not the dreams Michael had stolen. New dreams. Better dreams. "You wanted to open a bakery once," Richard said that night after the birthday chaos had settled. "Do you still want that?" Talia had mentioned it maybe twice in passing. The fact that he remembered, that he'd been paying attention, made her chest tight. "I don't know. Maybe someday. The triplets are still so young, and..." What if someday was now? Richard pulled up something on his phone. "There's a professional pastry program. 6 months, part-time. I can watch the kids during classes. Or we can hire help. Whatever you need." "Richard, that's expensive." "Talia." He took her hand. "You funded someone else's dream with your last dollar. Let me fund yours with money that won't even make a dent. Please." She enrolled the following week. 6 months of learning French techniques and perfecting lamination and understanding the science of baking. Richard set up a commercial-grade kitchen in the spare room so she could practice. He became her taste tester, offering honest feedback on everything from croissant layers to chocolate chip cookie ratios. "These are incredible," he said, biting into her brown butter chocolate chip cookie attempt number 47. "Like sell your soul to the devil incredible." Talia laughed. "They're good, but..." "Talia, I've eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants. These are better than anything I've paid $200 a plate for." 18 months of preparation followed. Recipe development. Business planning. Finding the perfect location. A corner spot in Lincoln Park with huge windows and enough space for both a bakery counter and small cafe seating. Richard was her silent partner, providing capital but letting Talia run everything. Her name on the business license. Her vision. Her dream. They called it Talia's Table. The concept was simple: comfort food with a gourmet twist. Pastries that nourished the soul as much as the body. A place where people could feel at home. The grand opening had lines out the door. A food blogger posted about the brown butter chocolate chip cookies, calling them transcendent. The maple bacon croissants became legendary. People started arriving before dawn to ensure they got one before they sold out. Within 6 months, Talia was hiring staff and expanding hours. Within a year, she was opening a second location. Then a third. She built an empire. Not Richard's empire. Not something handed to her. Something she created with her own hands, her own recipes, her own vision. Something no one could ever take away. Her employees became like family. Customers made Talia's Table part of their daily ritual. The business grew organically, fueled by quality and love and Talia's genuine passion for feeding people. National attention followed. Food Network wanted to feature her. Shipping requests poured in from across the country. Talia's brown butter cookies and signature croissants could now be ordered online, delivered fresh anywhere in America. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. Strong. Confident. Sure of her own worth. Building something beautiful not despite her past, but informed by it. Every cookie baked with a knowledge of what it meant to have nothing. Every customer greeted with the empathy of someone who understood struggle. Michael existed somewhere in the world, but Talia had zero contact with that life. She deleted everything: old social media, email addresses, phone numbers. Got a new phone. Created new accounts. A fresh start in every possible way. As far as Michael knew, she disappeared into thin air. Exactly how Talia wanted it. She lived peacefully, abundantly, successfully, in a house full of love, with 3 beautiful children and a husband who supported her dreams without trying to control them. Running businesses that brought joy to thousands of people. She'd taken the ashes of her first marriage and built something so much better than what she'd lost. And then, 3 years after the divorce, the invitation arrived. It came to Talia's table's business address. Someone had done their homework to find her. A heavy cream envelope with elegant calligraphy. You're invited to celebrate with Michael and Jane Bosch at their annual Halloween gala. Talia stared at it for a long moment, feeling nothing. No anger. No pain. No desire for revenge. Just curiosity. What is it? Richard asked, finding her in the office after closing. She handed him the invitation. Michael's throwing a Halloween party. He invited me. Richard's expression darkened. That's ballsy, stupid, cruel. Talia took the invitation back. All of the above. You're not going. Probably not. She studied the elaborate script, the expensive paper. Michael was showing off. Proving he'd made it. Although what? Talia looked at her husband. At the man who'd loved her when she was broken. Who'd supported her dreams without stealing them. Who'd adopted her children and built a family based on choice rather than obligation. Although, she said slowly, it might be nice to close that chapter. For real. Show him I'm not the broken woman he left behind. Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, not a kind smile, but something sharper. More satisfied. If you want to go, he said, we'll go. All of us. And we'll show Michael Bosch exactly what he threw away. Talia looked at the invitation again. Yeah, she said softly. Let's do that. 3 years after the divorce, on a sunny October afternoon, Talia was at her flagship bakery testing autumn menu items with her head pastry chef when her assistant brought in the mail. This one's addressed to you personally, Maya said, handing over a cream-colored envelope that looked expensive. Wrong name, though. Says Talia Jones. Talia wiped flour from her hands and took the envelope. Heavy cardstock. Elegant calligraphy. Her old name written in elaborate script like whoever sent it didn't know, or didn't care, that she wasn't Talia Jones anymore. She opened it. You're cordially invited to celebrate with Michael and Jane Bosch at their annual Halloween gala. Saturday, October 28th, 8 p.m. Black tie optional. Costumes encouraged. Tucked inside was a handwritten note on matching stationery. Talia. I thought it would be nice to invite you to celebrate our success. After all, you helped me get started in life, and I wanted to show my appreciation for everything you did during our time together. It would mean a lot to have you there to see how well things have turned out. Feel free to bring a date if you have one. Best, Michael. Talia read it twice. Then a third time, her hands starting to shake. The mockery was barely veiled. The condescension dripped from every word. Helped me get started, like she'd been a stepping stone rather than the foundation. Show my appreciation, when he'd shown his appreciation by taking everything and leaving her with nothing. Feel free to bring a date if you have one. The assumption that she was still alone, still broken, still the desperate woman he'd discarded. He wanted to parade his success in her face. Show her the life he'd built with her money. Make her the cautionary tale for his guests. See that sad woman in the corner? That's my ex-wife. The one who couldn't handle my ambition. Lucky I got away from her. Tears pricked Talia's eyes, not from sadness, but from the sheer audacity of it. Talia. Maya's voice was concerned. You okay? Fine. Talia's voice didn't sound fine. Can you give me a minute? She walked to her office, closing the door just as Richard texted that he was picking up the triplets from preschool. Perfect timing. She needed him. He found her 20 minutes later, still staring at the invitation like it might spontaneously combust. What's wrong? Richard set down the diaper bag, because even at almost 3 years old, accidents happened, and crossed to her desk. Talia handed him the invitation without speaking. She watched his face as he read. Watched his expression shift from confused to angry to something darker. Protective and furious in equal measure. He invited you to humiliate you. Richard's voice was carefully controlled. He wants you to see his success. His perfect life. His new family. He wants you to feel small. He has no idea who I am now. Talia took the invitation back. He thinks I'm still her. Still broken. Still alone. What do you want to do? It was the right question. Not we're ignoring this, or let me handle it. Just, what do you want to do? Talia stood and walked to the window overlooking the street. Her street. Where her bakery, her third location, served hundreds of customers daily. Where she employed 23 people and created something beautiful from nothing. She could ignore the invitation. Continue her peaceful life. She'd worked too hard to risk disruption. Built too much to let Michael's calculated cruelty pull her back into darkness. But the assumption that she was still that broken woman. Still vulnerable. Still intimidated by his success. Still someone who could be made to feel less than. That lit a fire in her chest. I want to go. The words surprised her even as she said them. Richard came to stand beside her. You're sure about that? I'm sure. Talia turned to face him. Not to prove anything to Michael. Not for revenge or to make him feel bad. But to close that chapter properly. To face him from a position of strength and show myself, not him myself, how far I've come. Richard studied her face for a long moment. Then nodded. Then we go. We. You think I'm letting you walk in there alone? His expression softened. We go. All of us. You, me, and the triplets. The triplets. 3 beautiful, healthy, perfect children. Living proof of everything Michael had been wrong about. The woman he'd called broken had given birth to 3 babies within a year of their divorce. It felt poetic. Cosmic justice without the need for cruelty. Okay, Talia said softly. We go as a family. Over the next 3 weeks, Richard did what Richard did best, research. He pulled up Michael's social media, accounts Talia had blocked years ago, but that existed in public view for anyone to see. The posts were exactly what she'd expected. Constant updates about success and achievements. Photos of expensive cars. Designer clothes. The confidence of a man who believed he'd earned everything he had. But the smiles never reached his eyes. Look at this one, Richard said one evening, laptop open on the kitchen island while Talia packed lunches for preschool. Jane looks miserable. Talia glanced at the photo. Michael and Jane at some charity gala, both dressed impeccably. Jane's smile was tight, uncertain. Their 2 children, now joined by a third, a baby in Jane's arms, looked uncomfortable in their formal clothes. Michael's caption read, "Blessed to celebrate another milestone with my beautiful family. The journey to forever begins with knowing what real love looks like." The subtext was clear. Talia had been practice. The warm-up act. The mistake he'd learned from. He posts about the party constantly, Richard continued scrolling. Here, 3 days ago. Photo of the venue. Talia looked at the elegant mansion, all lit up with Halloween decorations. The caption read, "Can't wait to celebrate with the people who matter. New beginnings require letting go of old mistakes." Hashtag blessed, hashtag new chapter, hashtag success. Old mistakes. That's what she was to him. An old mistake. A chapter best forgotten. He's really going to regret this, Richard said quietly. Don't. Talia put her hand over his. I don't want to go there to make him regret anything. I just want to close the door. But Richard was already researching Michael's current situation. Financial records were public if you knew where to look. Business registrations. Property deeds. The digital trail everyone left whether they knew it or not. He's doing well, Richard admitted. House in a nice neighborhood. Company worth about $2.5 million now. 3 locations. Growing client base. Talia looked at the screen showing Bosch Solutions' website. Michael's photo on the About Us page, looking polished and successful. No mention of how he'd started. No acknowledgement of the woman who'd funded his dream. She waited for the anger. The resentment. The bitterness of knowing her $45,000 had built his empire. It didn't come. Instead, she felt something close to peace. That money had done exactly what she'd hoped, built a better life. Just not for her. And that was okay. She'd built her own better life. Without stealing. Without manipulation. Without destroying someone else to rise. I'm not angry anymore, Talia said, surprising herself. I'm really not. He's living well. Good. I'm living better. And now I get to show him that. Richard closed the laptop and pulled her close. You're incredible. You know that. I'm just tired of letting him have power over me. Even the power to make me avoid him. She pulled back to meet Richard's eyes. 3 years ago, I would have crumbled at this invitation. Hidden. Let him win. But now. Now you're Talia Foster. Richard smiled. Mother of 3. Owner of a bakery empire. Wife of a man who thinks you hung the moon. And completely out of Michael Bosch's league. Now, Talia agreed, I'm going to walk into his party with my family and show him exactly what he threw away. Not for revenge. Not to wound. Just to close a chapter and prove, to herself most of all, that the woman who'd signed those divorce papers was gone. In her place stood someone stronger. Someone who'd survived and thrived. Someone Michael Bosch no longer had the power to break. The night before the party, Talia stood in a 4-season suite overlooking Chicago's skyline and tried to remember how to breathe. This wasn't about extravagance. Richard had offered to book the presidential suite, and she'd insisted on something simpler. This was about confidence. About returning to the city that had broken her as someone completely different. The triplets were still buzzing from their first plane ride, chattering about clouds and tiny cars and how the flight attendant had given them extra cookies. They didn't understand the significance of this trip. To them, it was just an adventure. A fancy hotel with big beds and room service. Mama, can we jump on the bed? Nate asked, already bouncing on his toes. Absolutely not, Talia said, catching Rosa mid-leap. Nice try though. Putting them to bed took longer than usual. They were overstimulated, overtired, and completely wired. Richard handled Pete and Nate while Talia lay with Rosa in the second bedroom, stroking her daughter's curls until her eyes finally drooped. Mama. Rosa's voice was sleepy. Are we going to a party tomorrow? Yes, baby. A grown-up party. Will there be cake? Talia smiled despite her anxiety. Probably. Good. I like cake. If only life were that simple. Cake and clouds and adventures without the weight of history pressing down on your chest. Talia barely slept. She lay in the dark beside Richard, listening to his steady breathing, thinking about the last time she'd been in Chicago. Leaving with nothing but what fit in her Honda Civic. Broken and convinced she'd never be whole again. Now she was returning with everything. A husband who loved her. 3 beautiful children. Businesses that bore her name and thrived under her leadership. Financial security she'd built herself. The transformation felt almost fictional. Like a story that happened to someone else. Getting ready started at noon. Talia had hired a stylist, something she never would have considered 3 years ago, but Richard had insisted. "You're going to look so stunning that Michael chokes on his champagne," he'd said. "Let's make sure of it." Her dress was a deep red devil costume, but elevated. Designer fabric that hugged her curves, a structured bodice that made her feel powerful rather than exposed, and a delicate horn headpiece that was more elegant than cartoonish. She looked sophisticated, confident, beautiful. Richard emerged from the bathroom in his tuxedo, looking like he'd stepped off a magazine cover. Classic, timeless, the kind of understated wealth that didn't need to announce itself. The triplets' costumes had been custom-made. Nate's tiny vampire costume complete with a cape that dragged adorably behind him. Pete's miniature gentleman's tuxedo that matched Richard's exactly. Rosa's glittering red princess dress that made her spin in circles, delighted with how it sparkled. "We match, Mama," Rosa announced, twirling beside Talia's red dress. "We do, baby. We're a team." At 1:30 p.m., the Lamborghini Aventador arrived. Talia stared at it through the hotel window, bright orange, gleaming like fire, impossible to miss. "Richard, that's too much." He came to stand beside her. "I can cancel it. We can take the SUV. It's very dramatic." "This isn't showing off, Talia. It's showing up. There's a difference." Richard turned her to face him. "You have nothing to prove to Michael Bosch. But if we're doing this, we're doing it right. We're walking in there as a family, happy, successful, thriving. And yes, we're arriving in style. Because you deserve to feel like the queen you are." Talia looked at her husband, this man who'd found her broken and never once tried to fix her, just loved her while she fixed herself. "Okay. Let's do it." The drive to Michael's mansion took 20 minutes through Chicago's upscale neighborhoods. 20 minutes of Talia's heart racing and palms sweating despite the car's climate control. 20 minutes of every doubt resurfacing like monsters from her subconscious. What if this was a mistake? What if Michael found some way to humiliate her? What if seeing him made her crumble back into that broken woman she'd fought so hard to leave behind? Richard must have sensed her spiral because he squeezed her hand. "Look at me." Talia met his eyes. "You are not the same woman who left Chicago 3 years ago," he said firmly. "You are Talia Foster, CEO of Talia's Table with 3 locations and national distribution. Mother of 3 beautiful children. My wife. My partner. My equal in every possible way. Richard. You're not proving anything to Michael tonight. You're proving something to yourself. That you survived. That you thrived. That the woman he discarded was the prize he was too stupid to appreciate." He cupped her face gently. "And when you walk through those doors with me and our children, the only thing Michael Bosch will feel is regret. Deep, crushing regret that he threw away the best thing that ever happened to him." Talia kissed him, not caring that she was messing up her lipstick. "I love you. I love you too. Now let's go show your ex-husband what real success looks like." Michael's mansion was exactly as fancy as expected. As the Lamborghini pulled up to the entrance, Talia could see marble floors through the open doors. Crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light. Elaborate Halloween decorations that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Professional-grade fog machines, animatronic monsters, carved pumpkins that were definitely done by artists rather than amateurs. Other guests were arriving in expensive costumes. Designer dresses disguised as witch outfits. Tuxedos paired with elaborate masks. The parking area was full of Mercedes and BMWs and Teslas. Michael's people now, successful, polished, wealthy. The type who would have dismissed old Talia without a second glance. But new Talia? New Talia was a different story. The Lamborghini pulled up directly in front of the entrance. Impossible to miss. orange and gleaming like a phoenix rising from flames. Inside, Talia could see the party in full swing. Chicago's elite mingling with champagne glasses, elaborate costumes and fake blood, and the kind of Halloween party that cost more than most weddings. This was Michael's stage. His moment. His celebration of everything he'd built. He had no idea he'd just invited his own reckoning. The car door opened. Richard stepped out first. 6 feet of quiet confidence in a perfect tuxedo. The kind of presence that made people turn and wonder who he was. He extended his hand back into the car. Talia took it. She emerged into the October evening air, red dress catching the light, diamonds at her throat sparkling. Her horn headpiece sat perfectly on her styled hair. She'd never felt more beautiful, more powerful, more completely and utterly herself. But she wasn't alone. Richard reached back into the car and carefully lifted out 3 children in their elaborate costumes. Nate in his vampire cape. Pete in his miniature tuxedo. Rosa in her sparkling red princess dress. Triplets. 3 perfect, healthy, beautiful children. The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral. A collective gasp rippled through the entrance area. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Every eye turned to watch as this impossibly elegant family walked toward the mansion's entrance. The whispers started spreading like wildfire. Wait, is that Michael's ex-wife? I thought she was poor. How is she stepping out of a Lamborghini? Who's the man with her? Oh my God, is that Richard Foster? The Richard Foster. Are those triplets? Didn't Michael say his first wife couldn't have kids? Those are real diamonds. I can tell from here. That car costs $500,000. Each whisper was a nail in the coffin of Michael's narrative. Each shocked face was proof that the story he'd told, about his pathetic ex-wife who'd held him back, was crumbling in real time. At the entrance, dressed in an elaborate vampire costume complete with theatrical fangs and a flowing cape, Michael Bosch stood frozen. His face, already pale with makeup, went completely white. The confident smile he'd been wearing all evening, the one he'd perfected while greeting guests and accepting congratulations on his success, collapsed into slack-jawed shock. Talia watched the moment of recognition. Watched his brain struggle to reconcile the image before him with a narrative he'd constructed. His poor, broken ex-wife. His victim. His proof of superiority. His biggest mistake. Standing before him with triplets on her hip, a billionaire on her arm, and an aura of success that made his achievements look small and petty by comparison. Beside him, Jane Stevenson, now Jane Bosch, stood in an elaborate witch costume, her hand frozen over her mouth. Her eyes darted between Talia, Richard, the children, and the Lamborghini. Then to Michael. Then back to Talia. The shock on her face was profound. This wasn't the woman Michael had described. This wasn't the broken, pathetic ex-wife who'd been too damaged to function. This was someone else entirely. Someone formidable. Talia walked forward, Richard's hand warm in hers, the triplets chattering excitedly about the decorations. She met Michael's eyes and smiled. Not with malice. Not with cruelty. But with something far more devastating. Complete and total indifference. Hello, Michael. Her voice was steady, pleasant, like greeting an old acquaintance rather than the man who destroyed her. Thank you for the invitation. Michael's voice came out uncertain, strangled. Talia? You actually came. He was struggling to find words. To process. His eyes kept moving between her face, her dress, Richard, the children. Like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. You look different. I feel different. Talia gestured to Richard. This is my husband, Richard Foster. Richard, this is Michael Bosch. The 2 men shook hands, Richard's grip firm and confident, Michael's noticeably weaker. And these, Talia continued, her hand moving to Rosa's curls, are our children. Nate, Pete, and Rosa. The triplets waved at the strange man in the vampire costume, more interested in the fog machine behind him than the tension crackling in the air. Michael was processing. She could see it happening in real time. She'd gotten pregnant. Had 3 babies. The woman he'd blamed for their inability to conceive. The woman he'd convinced himself was broken. The woman he'd claimed was the problem. Had given birth to triplets within a year of their divorce. The math was devastating, and everyone watching knew it. "I'm surprised you came," Michael finally managed. "Why?" Talia's smile didn't waver. "I thought it would be nice to celebrate your happiness. After all, as you said in your note, I helped you get started in life. It's wonderful to see how well you've done with that opportunity." Each word was polite, pleasant, perfectly appropriate for a conversation between former spouses who'd moved on. And each word was a knife, cutting away at the story Michael had told himself and everyone else. Jane was watching in horror, finally understanding what her husband had done. What he'd taken. Who he'd destroyed to build his success. Other guests were starting to drift closer, sensing drama. Phones were coming out. This was going to be all over social media within the hour. Michael Bosch's Halloween party, where his ex-wife showed up looking like a queen and made him look like a fool. "Thank you for inviting us," Talia said, already moving past him toward the entrance. "We won't stay long, early bedtime for the little ones, but we wanted to pay our respects." She didn't look back. Didn't wait for his response. Just walked past him into the party with her family, her head high, her confidence absolute. She hadn't come to beg. Hadn't come to prove she was worthy of his regret. Hadn't come for revenge or vindication. She'd come to close a chapter. To show herself and him that the woman he destroyed had rebuilt herself into something far stronger than he'd ever been. Michael Bosch thought he'd been throwing a party to celebrate his success. Instead, he'd provided the stage for his own humiliation. And Talia Jones, now Talia Foster, walked away from him for the second and final time, leaving him standing in the doorway of his own party, watching the life he'd thrown away disappear into the crowd. The night was just getting started. But for Talia, the real triumph wasn't the arrival. It wasn't the shock on Michael's face or the whispers of the crowd. It was the fact that when she looked at him, really looked at him, she felt nothing but pity. He was still who he'd always been. Small, cruel, empty. And she was finally completely free. Now you might be wondering, what happened next? Did Michael say anything? Did Jane confront Talia? Did the rest of the party turn into the disaster Michael deserved? I'll leave that to your imagination, unless you want me to tell the rest of the story. If you want to know what happened after Talia walked through those doors, how the night unfolded, what Michael said when he finally found his voice, and how Talia truly felt facing her past, let me know in the comments. If enough of you want part 2, I'll make it happen. And so, that's the thing about people like Michael. They think breaking you is the end of your story. They think they get to write the final chapter. But they don't. You do. Talia rewrote her entire story. And if you're watching this right now and you're in your own chapter of pain, whether it's a divorce, a betrayal, a loss, or just feeling like life knocked you down, I want you to remember something. You're not broken. You're just between chapters. If you want more stories like this, stories about resilience, transformation, and people who refuse to stay down, hit that subscribe button. I post new content every day, and honestly, this community is full of people who understand what it means to rebuild from scratch. Leave a comment and let me know, what's one thing you're rebuilding in your life right now? Let's support each other. Because that's what this channel is about, reminding each other that we're stronger than we think. And if you enjoyed this story, you'll surely love the next one. Click the button showing on your screen right now to watch the next one. Thanks for being here. See you same time tomorrow.